You are about to listen to the 365 Days of Astronomy podcast.
What do they talk about?
Astronomy, you know, stuff that's far away.
How far?
How far? Well,
this stuff is far. It's really far. This stuff is far, far, far away. We're talking far. Like uber far. You can't get there by car today. It's super duper crazy far, but not just pulsars, quasars, and stars. We mean it's far. Far, far. If there's some doubt, listen to a shout. This stuff is far.
the IYA 365 Days of Astronomy podcast starts now.
Hi, and welcome to the International Year of Astronomy's podcast for August 28th. I think you're in for a real treat today as we mark the 220th anniversary of the discovery of Saturn's fascinating moon Enceladus by the British astronomer William Herschel. Enceladus is rapidly rising to the top of the list of fascinating objects in the solar system. You know, if you look close, you can actually pick out Herschel's tube just using Google Earth or Google Maps, if you're sharp enough to find the Royal Observatory near London. Look for a rectangular structure kind of near the main observatory buildings. I'll leave the proof of this as an exercise for the listener. Now, one of the most exciting astronomical discoveries of this decade has got to be the discovery of plumes of water vapor emanating from the south pole of Enceladus. Now, keep in mind this is a really tiny moon that's 10 times as far from the sun as the Earth. Now, with the sun's light expanding in all directions, side to side and up and down, that means that Enceladus really only gets 1% as much light and warmth and energy from the sun as we do here on Earth. Therefore, the environment in orbit around Saturn is really bitter cold. To find a geologically active body in such an environment is stunning. Just the possibility that liquid water could exist beneath the surface of Enceladus and be the source of the plumes has shocked a generation of scientists, and will certainly keep the Cassini spacecraft and project busy for years to come. To talk more about Enceladus's plumes and some upcoming observations that Cassini will make, I took some time with Dr. Robert Pappalardo, Cassini project scientist, and Dr. Amanda Hendricks, who's the co-lead for Cassini icy satellite planning. So, what do you remember from when you first heard about the plumes?
So I remember where I was even before we knew that there was a plume at the South Pole, but when we were first getting clues.
Yeah.
And this
it came in steps, right?
Yeah.
It
was first in April 2005, and we were here at the lab having an icy satellites workshop.
Yeah.
So we were over in building 183, and I remember very clearly Michelle Doherty giving her presentation about her magnetometer measurements.
Right.
And saying something funny is going on. I don't know if Enceladus has an atmosphere or what, but...
Because the magnetic field lines were bending in a strange way.
They were getting draped around the body,
Yeah.
Like a non-inert body.
Yeah.
So something funny was going on. And so she made a very compelling argument to make the next flyby, which was going to be that July of 2005, much closer than we were planning it. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And kind of exciting because nobody knew quite what was going on, but something was.
So it came in steps, like over about a year, didn't it? The clues were coming in piece by piece from the different instruments.
Yeah, so the magnetometer got clues in February and March of 2005, those two flybys. And then, of course, we lowered the July 2005 flyby, and that was the smoking gun. And we still hadn't even seen the plumes at that point.
with like images or anything
with
like
images.
that? Yeah.
That came later on in November.
Yeah. What do you remember about hearing about it?
Well, I wasn't part of the Cassini project yet at that time. I was a professor at University of Colorado, and and the first I really heard an announcement was an email from John Spencer.
Yeah.
It said, okay, now the story can be told, because the science articles were out. And he sent an email to a bunch of us and attached the press release. Yeah. And I was bowled over. And, you know, I kind of remember thinking, oh, yeah, activity. Well, let's see what the evidence is. And went to the site showing the images, and it was spectacular.
Yeah,
could not believe that there was measurable heat coming off of Enceladus besides, you know, the geology, bizarre geology itself. Yeah. So, I was absolutely blown away that we were seeing an icy satellite in action. And what's wonderful is how Enceladus sheds light on other moons. It's like a dream come true to be able to watch what's going on, when it's going on.
Yeah.
And then be able to go back to the other moons and say, oh, maybe that's what happened here. You know, they were trying to put the pieces together in looking at other icy satellites like Europa or Miranda, and here it's going on in Enceladus.
Yeah, most of the time we look at things that aren't dynamically varying. They're not in action. Things happened, you know, millions of years ago, and we're just seeing the aftermath.
Right, and Io's the obvious exception, but it's a rocky guy. And here finally was an icy satellite doing its thing. But it seems like the evidence is pretty good that there's liquid water somewhere down there. I'm not convinced it's connected to the surface, but you know, that's what the research is all about.
But you know, liquid water under the surfaces of icy satellites is sort of not infrequent these days.
Yeah.
Except again that Enceladus is so small, and so I'll be surprised again. Wow, could there be water in Enceladus? And maybe it's really easy to get liquid water.
Yeah. What do you think Herschel would think about Enceladus today, since his discovery? I mean, he just saw a tiny white light.
He did, and I think at the time he didn't know how exceptional it was, because he had no idea then how big it was or small.
Yeah.
So he couldn't attach a size or, you know, give it an albedo really or a brightness. But I think he would think it was pretty cool.
I bet he'd wonder how the heck it could happen, and we'd you know, he'd probably want to learn all about tidal heating and what makes a moon like Enceladus tick.
It's almost a pity that he had no idea how exceptional a satellite it was that he discovered.
And people had suggested that it was active before, but nobody could make it work, I think.
And the degree of activity, how extreme it is
and the other funny thing, though, is the south polar location still, I think. I mean, you know, we have ideas for why it's there, but it's a little bit different.
Than why there, why just that pole,
and only there. Concentrated there.
Yeah. Cassini's fortunate enough to have a couple of flybys coming up in the next month or two. We're numbering them, and we're calling them E7 and E8, and they're both in November, right?
Right. So E7, which is the 7th targeted flyby, is on November 2nd, and E8 is on November 21st. And these will be really great flybys. On E7, actually, we are going to be the closest to the surface in the plume that we've ever been. So we'll be in the densest part of the plume that we've ever been. So this will be really, really exciting. And so the fields and particles instruments will get to make some really great measurements and kind of taste and sniff the plume and really see what it's made out of and how dense it is. And what kind of gases and particles are there. And on E8... this one is a little bit farther out. It's about 1,600 kilometers from the surface, which is ideal for taking pictures and doing compositional measurements and temperature measurements. And that'll be the key thing of this flyby, is getting really high-resolution, complete temperature maps of the South Pole. So we need to finish doing that. But also there's some indications of variability of temperature along these tiger stripes, and so that's really interesting, too.
And looking farther beyond... to doing gravity science at Enceladus and revealing what's going on in the interior. Is there something different below the South Pole compared to the rest of the satellite?
Great. So people who are interested in Enceladus and are as excited about it as we are should stay tuned for even more exciting and interesting papers and articles coming out for it.
Definitely.
Well, thanks very much. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll take some time to explore some of the things we talked about today. You can learn more about William Herschel and the Royal Observatory on the web at nmm.ac.uk. And you can learn more about Enceladus, Saturn, and the Cassini mission at saturn.jpl.nasa.gov. Thanks very much for listening.
You are listening to the IYA 365 Days of Astronomy podcast.